If Amber Heard hasn't filed bankruptcy, and since neither party has filed a suspension bond in the Virginia court, then both of them are free to collect their judgments. So why aren't they doing that? Let's talk about it. Part of the challenge with collecting in this case is the fact that the judgment is coming from a Virginia court, but neither Johnny Depp nor Amber Heard lives in Virginia, or as far as we know, has any property there. And it's part of the nature of our federalist system that the power of a state to act ends at its own borders. And so in order for this judgment to be enforceable, it's going to have to be taken outside of the boundaries of Virginia in order to do something with it. So that is feasible. The ability to do that arises from Article 4, Section 1 of the Constitution, which is known as the Full Faith and Credit Clause, which says very simply, full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. So a judgment in Virginia is a valid judgment in any state. That means that no state has the power to say, we don't agree with that, we're not going to recognize it. And part of the reason is because under the federal constitution, due process laws, Bill of Rights, things like that, there's basically a floor that all of the state procedures have to follow in order to meet basic guarantees that it's going to be fair. So the judgment is enforceable in California, but there's going to have to be some steps that they have to go through in order to do that. So the states where Johnny and Amber are going to want to be looking to enforce their judgments are the states where the other party resides, the state where the other party owns property, or the state where anybody else is in possession of property that belongs to them. So this makes California a very likely target for collection, not just because it's, as far as we know, where they have homes, or at least did up until recently. We know that Amber Heard did sell her home out there in the desert. And Johnny has homes kind of all over, so we don't know if his primary residence is in California or if he is, maybe living in France. So residence is one possibility, but the main issue is going to be the fact that the companies that they have worked for, the studios, are in California. And so when it comes to things like residuals, those earnings that they're entitled to based on the future performance of their movies, those are going to be in the possession of, for example, in the case of Aquaman, Warner. And Warner is a California corporation. So in order to, for example, garnish Amber Heard's residual earnings from Aquaman, Johnny will need to go through a process of what's called domestication of the judgment. And that just means that there's steps you have to go through to basically get an out-of-state judgment formally recognized and enforceable in the state of California. And so, of course, they have laws that tell you how to do that. In California, the process itself is pretty straightforward. There's an application that you basically have to file that establishes, the fact of your judgment, how much of it remains outstanding, and provides some basic information about the nature of that judgment. And it also provides that this is done in a superior court. And so that's interesting, mainly because it means that when this happens, there will be a public record of it. There will be an application that is assigned a case number, has the parties associated with it, and so should be able to be located when that happens. So you might be wondering, why hasn't that already happened? Well, that's a very good question, and there is an answer to it. And the answer to that, in my opinion, is here in this particular statute from the California Code of Civil Procedure. We saw in Virginia that the judgment is presumed to be final and enforceable from the time that it's entered. And so if a party wants to stay the other side's ability to enforce that judgment, they have to post this suspension bond. So we heard a lot about the suspension bond in the days following the verdict. The fact that Judge Azcarate set it in the amount of the judgment plus 6% interest for a year. There was some confusion about whether that was a condition to proceed with an appeal, which I've made a previous video about. The answer to that is no, it's not a condition, but it is an option that they have. And at this point in time, to the best of our knowledge, nobody has filed a suspension bond. I haven't checked on this recently, but I did call the Fairfax County Clerk's office about a month ago to find out if that had happened, and at that point in time, it had not. That's the way that Virginia does it. But California does it a little differently. And in this particular statute, they have this provision that says the court shall grant a stay of enforcement where an appeal from the sister state judgment is pending. So California then, unlike Virginia, does not treat the judgment as final once it's entered. It treats the judgment as final once the appeal is concluded. So what this effectively means is that enforcement would be stayed as long as the appeal is ongoing in Virginia. So there's not really any point in trying to domesticate the judgment in California and start these collection proceedings as long as the appeal in Virginia is underway. Like I said, pretty much any state where the person resides or has property or a third party has property belonging to that person, any of those states are good forums for collection activity. And so it's possible they could get information relating to other states that would be appropriate. Texas might be an option, simply because we know Amber is from there. Her family is there. She may have property there. They may be in possession of property that belongs to her there. And so in that case, they would be able to pursue collection activity in Texas under Texas law. And then we'd be looking at Texas law to see, are they like Virginia, where the judgment is immediately enforceable, or are they like California, where we have to wait out the appeal process? So this is just part of the reason why I describe the collection process as kind of like the getting back down from Mount Everest part of a civil lawsuit. It's the descent from Mount Everest where most of the deaths occur. That's the hard part. And so you can see now that it just depends on what state you're talking about. You have to research the laws of that state to figure out what your options are. If the property in that state is limited, then, you know, it may not be worth your while to undertake this process, which you're going to have to pay your lawyer to do. You're going to have to pay the court fees to do it if you're only going to recover a small amount. Now, I mentioned, of course, that residence is another option, and that's an interesting one in this particular case because we saw Amber Heard sold her home in Palm Desert in the Yucca Valley, but we don't know where she's living now. And there's been some speculation, oh, she's moving to Israel or she's moving assets to Israel. I don't know if any of this is true or not. Who's to say? But it is the case that if we don't know where she resides, that also can make collection a bit difficult, not just because we can't identify a state, which is a good option to be able to pursue these actions, but also because it becomes more difficult to serve her. These are going to be new cases, new actions. If they want to pursue something like a debtor's examination, where they call her in to testify under oath about the nature and location of her assets and income, they have to serve her with notice of that. And if you don't know where a person resides, that gets a lot more difficult to do. You have to, basically find them where they happen to be and get past their security and somehow manage to hand it to them personally. And so, as we saw with the attempts to subpoena Elon Musk in the course of the trial, Elon, who coincidentally during this time frame decided he didn't want to own any more homes either, it can be very hard to chase that person down. So if you're wondering, is Amber going to be able to escape collection by simply running like a hunted fox? The answer to that is possibly, yeah. It just depends on, of course, how aggressive Johnny and his team want to get when it comes to trying to hunt her down and serve her, trying to exercise their options. But that's a hurdle that they would definitely have to clear. And it does make it more difficult if she can't be pinned down at a particular place where she lives. So when it comes to why isn't Johnny collecting the judgment, the bottom line is because under California law, his ability to do so is going to be stayed until the appeal is over. And until we have better information about where Amber lives or where she has property, not clear that there's another good jurisdiction to be able to pursue collection activity. So my expectation here is that they're just going to wait until the appeal is over, and then they'll see what their options are. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and stick around. I will see you in the next one.